In 2002, at the United States Penitentiary in Leavenworth, Kansas, a member of the Dirty White Boys in good standing decided that he had enough. Housed in the special housing unit, along with one of his brothers, whose name was Head, Head went to rec one day, and when he returned, his brother was gone. When he asked the cop where he was, the cop said he went up top. That is, he went into protective custody and dropped out. Hello, welcome to Convict Inc. I'm your host, Robert Hutzel. If you have not subscribed to this channel, please do so. If you like this video, please push like and share it with your family, friends, neighbors, enemies, etc. And I hope the R. Kelly stuff is shared with media heads. I should really start contacting some myself and just try to put a focus on this Michael Stein clown. Anyway, so here's the deal. In 2001, I had just joined the Dirty White Boys, and I was in the hole for who knows which. I stayed in the hole a lot during that time. While I was back there in the whole special housing unit, whatever, 4 or 5 members, or 4 members of the Dirty White Boys and an associate were transferred from USP Colorado, Florence, to Leavenworth after they got into a fight with the Serenos. Actually, after the Serenos mopped them up. That's really what happened. The Serenos stomped them out. One of the people was named Youngster. I'm not going to put his full name out on this, but his name was Youngster. Youngster. At the time, I'm in my early 30s. Youngster was probably 23, maybe 24. Very athletic kid. He was in prison actually for a crazy gun charge. He had a gun that was legal that they had pawned for some gas money when they were down in Florida, I believe, and he had a felony. So he was the only one with an ID, so he went and pawned his friend's gun, and that became a felon in possession of a firearm because he actually had possession of the gun to go pawn it. So he got, I think he had to do 7 years in all. Youngster, I want to say he started off at USP Terre Haute, where he was actually very anti-gang member, and from what I recall, hung out with a guy named Tony Adams. They were very close. Tony Adams would then go on to join the member of the Arms and become probably the biggest shot caller the Arms or Aryan Resistance Militia ever had, I would say. Anyway, so here's what's going down. In 2002 at Leavenworth, there were way too many Dirty White Boys in that compound. You always hear about gangs with their strength in numbers, right? Well, here's the problem with that. People got to eat. And when you have too many gang members on one compound, sometimes there's some of the gang members are left hungry, especially when you got a bunch of guys that have drug and alcohol problems, which every one of us did. So there was a lot of clashes, and we also had divisions. So there was actually, okay, let me not count the number. Let's just say that there was 12 Dirty White Boys at that time on the compound, right? Like 4 were really tight, 4 were super tight, 3 were super tight, 5 were super tight. So there was all these different power structures, if you will, or just friendships between each other, and the gang wasn't solid or whole. Constantly a lot of problem. Enter Rob Hutzel, also known as Romeo in his breakdancing career. Rob Hutzel from California/Oregon, when he was on the street, was a breakdancer. If you looked at him, you would never think he was a member of the Dirty White Boys because he was actually brown and had a Hispanic background that he didn't like to claim, but it was blatantly obvious. Nothing against that, nothing against him for that reason. Rob was one of these people that joined a gang and became a typical bully, okay? Now, there's guys that watch this that know other dirty white boys and stuff like that, and I'm sure you got a different opinion of certain dirty white boys. But I'm here to say that Rob is the kind of person that he didn't really have heart, but when he had a gang behind him, he thought that he was Superman, and he would bully the weak people in a bad way. Rob got punked out one day. Two things happened with Rob. This is important to the story. Rob got punked out by a black guy and didn't do nothing about it, and then tried to deny it. And then other white guys, non-gang affiliates, said, hey, I was there, this is what happened. But also what Rob did when they were at USP Florence and the Serenos jumped on the dirty white boys over a drug debt, Rob went and hid in his cell. He was one of these people that were absent, you know. So a lot of times when problems break out, you'll get one scraggler that was on the shitter, the cell door was locked, they had a phone call. There's always excuses that are made to duck wreck or to avoid an altercation. So Rob was not liked by any of us really at a certain point, except for Youngster and TC. Youngster, TC, and Rob Hutzel all came from USP Florence and were all very close. I liked all of them except for Rob, okay? So Youngster was fantastic. You know, he was a really good kid. Like I said, really athletic. He was well liked within the general population. A lot of people had problems with dirty white boys or gang members in general, but Youngster was one of those guys that that you really couldn't find much fault with. Okay, so Rob Hutzel gets hit. When I say hit, a guy named Scott Tolley and a dirty white boy named Sean, who had been a DWB for about 11 years in the FCIs or medium security facilities, finally got in trouble and was sent to USP, and the rest of us dogged him out. I have said before that dirty white boys that are made or become members in FCIs or LOs, if they go to a USP or a penitentiary, they have a really bad time with the brothers, because the brothers, the dirty white boys, did not respect guys that were patched up in medium security facilities. It's all a bunch of prison politics BS, but that's just how it was, okay? The dirty white boys in medium security facilities were more family. The dirty white boys in the USPs were more banded together by drugs, I would say. That's probably true in both cases, but anyway, I'm getting off subject. Well, after Rob Hutzel gets hit, and when I say hit, his face was fractured. They had to bring him out to the outside hospital emergency situation. For a minute, they thought that he was unalived, okay? And Sean was freaking out. Scott, not so much. And Scott did the blows with the cane that fractured his face. But TC and Youngster were really upset about Rob getting hit without their knowledge. So typically when another member is going to be moved on, it's a call by either the shot caller makes the call or it's brought to the group behind the guy's back, and it's, you know, unanimous or whatever. In this case, only a handful of dirty white boys decided to make a move against Rob, which caused more fractures within the gang. In my opinion, in retaliation, what happens is this. All the dirty white boys were locked up for different reasons after Rob got hit, with the exception of myself, Youngster, TC, Weasel, and Head, Robert Rasnick. An incident occurred between the dirty white boys and members of the Arms, which was going to get very ugly. And in my opinion, Head, TC, and Youngster decided before the Arms and the rest of the prison guys moved on us that they were going to move on No-Nose Rick Brown. No-Nose Rick Brown was the shot caller for a moment in time of the dirty white boys. Lot of flaws with Rick. He was a great fighter, but otherwise he was a scandalous guy, and operating closely with staff. Hence, I always say, be careful of the guys on top in any organization or gang. Watch them closely. Well, I'm in the cell one day, and I find out that actually, to be totally honest, I was in the cell in front of the mirror using drugs intravenously, and the cell door opens, and it's a staff member telling me that I have to go to the lieutenant's office, that I'm getting locked up because my brothers just moved on each other. And I remember having the needle right here as the lady opened up the door and was telling me that, and I was like looking at her through the mirror as I was doing the injection. It was crazy. There's a video I did about it a long time ago. We go to the hole, all of us. When we go to the hole, everything separated like it was. So really the car split in two, or the gang split in two at that time. You had those that were anti-no-nos, and then those were mad because no-nos got moved on without everybody else voting on it or whatever. It was a big mess. And as a matter of fact, after that incident with no-nos, the Dirty White Boys were all locked up and removed from Leavenworth for some years. There was no active members of the Dirty White Boys for at least a couple years after we were all expelled from that prison. That's what happened. Anyway, so that happens. The incident I told you about, no-nos, happens around the spring of 2002. They keep us in the special housing unit, or they keep us locked down until they transfer us. Now, first, we were all put in the SHU, or the special housing unit, which is like a county jail within the prison at Leavenworth, okay? At some point, they decided that they were gonna move all the Dirty White Boys to Building 63. Building 63 was one of the original housing units at Leavenworth. When it was opened as a special housing unit, or a whole, one of the most infamous guys there was the Birdman of Alcatraz, Robert Strad, which was really the Birdman of Leavenworth, and that little title big title carried over to Alcatraz for him. He was there in Building 63 for over 20 years. Building 63 had been closed down for years, with the exception of housing some AB members that were back for trial in '99. But it had been closed down for general population purposes for years. They actually remodeled it, and the reason they did was because they were letting a lot of DC prisoners into Leavenworth, and they anticipated a lot of violence due to the amount of DC prisoners coming in. The people that were housed in Building 63 were a lot of the guys that were check-ins, sex offenders, rats, whatever, and then they sent the Dirty White Boys. Let me tell you about Building 63. No central heating or air, and we got moved there during summertime, 100 degrees during the daytime, solid brick building, 6-man cells, although we only kept 4 to 5 people in a cell. The cells were huge. 5 of us can work out in a cell at one time, all do push-ups, burpees, and everything at one time. And we did because it was so hot. We get the sweat on and do our thing. But 5 of us at one time, that's how big those cells were. Shower inside. And I need to add here that I had never stayed so drunk and high in all my life as I did in Building 63. We drank every day. Not only did we drink, we made moonshine in Building 63. It was off the hook. It was party, party, party. Not only was it party, because we were put in 63, that is the Dirty White Boys, we were pissed, right? Because the SHU has air conditioning. The SHU, we thought there was more drugs over there. There was, like I said, there ended up being we got a lot of medication too. Percocets, Tylenol 3s. So we were playing that little game with medical too. But anyway, we caused a lot of problems for staff. In one cell, No-Nose Rick, Billy Weston, Randy Shreve, and Scott Tolley were in one cell. Another cell was me, Dusty, Jeremy Itis, James White. In the other cell, it was Robert Resnick, TC, Head, Youngster, and Weasel. There was 5 down there. So there's 3 different cells of Dirty White Boys. No-Nose cell, they ended up, there was an orderly. The orderlies are all rats, by the way, or sex offenders. There was an orderly that came to the door. They grabbed his arm, broke his arm, and took his watch off his wrist. He had a nice watch, and stole it. As the warden and all the executive staff were 2 cells down and watched the whole thing happen, okay? In a different incident, we in our cell had somebody named Cub that was in there who was a prospect. We assaulted him viciously. Doesn't really matter why. That was one incident. And on the heels of that, James White, which was an associate of ours, ended up throwing feces on a staff member named, anyway, I just drew a blank. And it doesn't matter, I'm sorry. So, and then there was the fires that we started, which is stupid, and then there's a sex offender that may or may not have been burned by yours truly. There was a flood, the Great Flood, where we actually put bags across the grill gate. It was bars with the grill on it. We put trash bags, put books, tore apart books, put books on the bottom, and put water, enough water in that cell that we were swimming in the cell. So it was probably waist high. That's how much water we had. And of course, when staff realized what we're doing, James White pulled the bags, the flood happened, and everybody almost got electrocuted because there was fans outside. My point is, we were causing a lot of problems for staff, okay? Now, down in the cell with TC, Head, Youngster, Weasel, and there's one more. Anyway, down there, Head and Youngster were having problems. Head was a big guy who liked to work out all day, and I'm sure that he was causing problems, just generating heat in the cell. Plus, he was a big guy, and I think he kind of disrespected Youngster at sometimes. While they were there, and TC was a moonshiner, by the way. TC made the best moonshine out of everybody there. And they were staying drunk on moonshine. They were shining basically every night. And when I say every night, let's just say, without any exaggeration, 3 nights a week. And I'm telling you, it was probably more than that. They were pulling down batches of moonshine. So, like I said, everybody was drunk, saturated, partied hard. And Youngster finds out from medical that he has contracted hepatitis C because of his intravenous drug use. Not only that, his enzymes were off the charts because of all the drinking he'd been doing. And his mother or somebody in the family had either died or was in the process of dying, and he was going through some bad times. One day, we get sent back to the special housing unit. Okay, they took us from 63 and put us back in the special housing unit. They were remodeling the special housing unit. That's why they took us out of there, they said. But anyway, we were put back over there, and within a few weeks, all of us were transferred to different facilities with the exception of Robert Rasnick, aka Head, and Youngster. They ended up in the cell together, exactly where Youngster didn't want to be. That is, in the cell with Head. One day, Head goes to rec, comes back. Let me say something I'm sorry. Usually when you're in the hole, one person goes to rec, one person stays in. That is either to give the person space, quiet time, masturbation time, or to sit on a batch of wine. If you make wine in the shoe back in that time period, the cops would not come in your cell and bother you as long as one person stayed in the cell. Why would they want one person to stay in the cell? Because that is less people they had to take to rec. It is a chore, a big job for officers to take everybody out of their cells, bring them to the rec cage, and then bring them back. They have to handcuff. It's just this big process. So it was kind of an unwritten rule. You keep a person in the cell, you guys stay in your cell, we won't bother your wine, your hooch. Well, Head comes back one day, expecting to see Youngster, and Youngster's gone. He tells the cop, "Hey, where's my brother?" And he said, "He tapped out." "What do you mean?" said Head. "He went to the doghouse." The doghouse, or D Block in Leavenworth, is, I think to this day, the only unit in Leavenworth that had not been remodeled, and they left it that way for historical purposes. There are 5 tiers. It is open-faced bars. There's no central heating and air. The windows were broken and they left them that way. Birds were flying all around inside that unit. They used the doghouse to put check-ins in, sex offenders, people that couldn't be on the compound with other guys. They would put in doghouse and leave them there for 18 months as a punishment for checking in, being a sex offender, whatever, okay? Rob Hutzel, who was hit by Scott Tully, I told you about, who almost died, was in the doghouse because he had been X'd out. Rob wasn't trying to be X'd out. Even after he got assaulted, he was trying to still say he was a dirty white boy. Nevertheless, they put him in the protective custody unit, which was D cell house. Youngster voluntarily went to the doghouse. Now, I personally believe that Youngster did it. There was signs. So after he got the diagnosis with the hepatitis C, he picked up the Bible. He stopped drinking, okay? Those are signs. Even if it's legitimate, your family member's dying, it's legitimate for somebody to try to want to turn their life around. But Youngster also did miss Rob and felt that Rob was unjustly X'd out of the gang. He wanted to be closer to Rob. I'm not making up excuses for him. I never even heard from him or seen him since I left Leavenworth in 2002. But I knew Youngster, how he thought, and I'm sure he just wanted to be around somebody familiar that he got along with. He missed Rob, and he was just tired of the whole gang stuff, you know? Which, okay, that would have been fine, except this happened next. Within a couple months, Youngster was transferred himself. Only Youngster was transferred to Coleman USP number 1, or Coleman 1. There, not only did he go there as a member of the Dirty White Boys, which he was not, he already dropped out, but in a very short period of time became the shot caller of the gang. Now, we didn't have communication like we do now back then. We didn't have email access, so we can email a family or friend on the street, send a message, it's half-ass coded or whatever, and that message then gets sent to another facility. The Dirty White Boys were, I don't know about now, but I'm going to say probably, they were a disorganization. They were not an organized gang. There was no central body or leading structure. Whatever Dirty White Boys are on a certain compound will have a leader. That leader is the leader of that prison only and has nothing to do with being a leader in other prisons. Okay? So, no structure is what I'm saying. So Youngster goes to Coleman, and about a year later, about a year it took us, we started hearing that Youngster was running the car, running the Dirty White Boys at Coleman. I'm not saying running the compound. I'm saying was in charge of the guys that were there. I believe there's about 5 of them. Now, here's another thing. Head, Robert Resnick, got out of prison, his time was due, and he got violated and went back, and when they went back, they sent him to Coleman 1. He went to Coleman 1 and did not bust Youngster out. He knew that Youngster dropped out and was now the shot caller. But from what I later heard, Head had 6 months to do. He just wanted out of prison. Youngster was supposedly, I guess, doing a fine job running the car for a period of time, and he just let it go and never told anybody. Eventually, they crashed out. The Dirty White Boys crashed out, and you guys will probably leave some comments and say why or whatever. I mean, I know the story. It's not important right here. But the moral of the story, people will say that I slander this gang. I, to this day, and I've said this about other people I've criticized, I liked Youngster. I would say still like Youngster, whatever. But this is a perfect example of prison gang, or even organized crime bullshit, okay? The rules are made up as they go. A person who drops out today might be a shot caller tomorrow. And don't laugh and think this is only for the Dirty White Boys. I can tell you numerous gangs with people who had PC cases who then went on to become prominent gang members. Hello, SAC, Crazy Train, or Train Wreck or Crazy Train, whatever, they called him Train. He was a protective custody case who went to Lewisburg, and a guy named Taz, which is the founder of the SAC, his little brother, after being told that Train Wreck was no good, whatever, patched him up anyway, and then Train goes on to be, I believe, a pretty powerful shot caller for SAC. I've done videos, I've talked about this before in the past. Again, I like that guy too. Train was all right. And I will say this, When he put in his work for the SAC, he did a hell of a job. I was there. Yeah, so just a story. Dirty white boy dropout becomes a shot caller. Crazy shit happens in the feds. Take care.